Okay, so we've already done some of this where you're just continuing on graphing linear equations. And we're going to graph in a coordinate plane instead of just one quadrant. We're going to use all 4 quadrants. So you're going to learn, or be reminded, I guess would be a better way to say that. And part of that is finding, when you're graphing 2 equations, you're finding the solution of an equation with 2 variables. So when you what's the typical way we write a linear equation before you graph it? Do you guys remember what that's called?
The slope.
The slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept. So if you don't already have this in your journals, put it in your journals. What is slope-intercept form? Very good. Y equals mx plus b. So when you have an equation, such as this one, the goal is to solve it for y so that you can graph. So how do we solve this one? What's our first step? We're solving for y, so what do we need to do first? How do we get y by itself?
But don't you already know that?
No.
Is this something?
We got to get y by itself, so we got to move everything over here over to this side. 7, 8. Stop. So my first step is,
Y to both sides,
well, I would move the 3x, yeah, so, and it's a positive, so you subtract it. So then I have negative y equals negative 3x plus 7, but I can't have a negative y, so just divide by negative 1. You're left with y equals, negative divided by a negative is a positive, so all it does is change the sign. So you'd get y equals 3x minus 7. Now, when you have it in that form, can you graph it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, for this example, they gave you some points. This is example 1. They gave you 3, 4, 1, negative 4, 5, negative 3, and negative 1, negative 2, and asked you which of these ordered pairs is a solution to that equation. Okay? Well, we got y equals 3x minus 7, right? So how do I find out which one of these is the solution? What do you think?
If it makes sense.
If you plug it in, and it comes out to being one side of the equal side equals the other. So, the only way to do this is to check. So I'm going to plug these 2 points in. So remember, this is x and this is y. So I say 4 equals 3 times 3 minus 7. Well, what's 3 times 3?
9.
What's 9 minus 7?
2.
Does 4 equal 2?
No.
No, so 3, 4 is not a solution. So we do it again. If I plug in 1 comma negative 4, so I have negative 4 equals 3 times 1 minus 7. What is 3 times 1?
3.
What is 3 minus 7?
Negative 4?
Yep. So does negative 4 equal negative 4?
Yeah.
So then the solution is 1 comma negative 4 is a solution. Shh. Make sense?
Yeah.
All right. Sometimes they're going to give you an equation. Look at the guided practice number 1. You can choose whether you want to put this in the journal. 4 comma negative 1/2. They want to know whether that is a solution to x plus 2y equals 5. Do I have to solve this for y to be able to test it? No.
No.
You can just plug in everything and make sure it equals 5. So my x is 4 plus 2. What's the y? Negative 1/2
Yes.
equals 5. So now we're just going to solve this. What's 2 times 1/2?
1.
So 4 minus 1 is what? Does 3 equal 5? So you would say no solution. Because the question at the beginning was, is this point a solution? All right, so now let's practice graphing. Example 2. We have the equation negative 2x plus y equals negative 3. In order to graph this, what do I need to do? Make a table, but first I need to solve this equation for y. So how do I get the y by itself? Move to the 2x, right. So it's a negative 2x, so what am I going to do?
Plus.
Yep, I'm going to add 2x to both sides. So then I get y equals 2x minus 3. Now I can graph that. Okay, I'm just going to put it kind of here in the corner. I know it's covering up my y, but y'all know what I'm doing.
Can we graph it? Or?
Yep, you guys got to graph it. You can just sketch it. It doesn't have to be on a graph paper. So what's my first point that I'm going to graph?
0.
No. What's my y-intercept?
You can graph the 2? No.
What's my y-intercept?
Oh, negative 3.
Negative 3. So you go to the y line and you put a negative 3. And then what's my slope?
Your slope is 2x.
So I go up 2 over 1. And then you draw a line. Yeah, the reason we put this in y equals mx plus b form is b is always the y-intercept. So it's really easy. You go on the y line and put a dot, and m is always the slope. Okay, if you don't have this in your journals, write it down. You should have that in there. Okay, any questions on how to graph?
No.
Anybody else have questions?
Yes.
That's fine.
See, that's when I just got my dad's office. His retainer cut his mouth and he's bleeding.
All right, so can anybody tell me what standard form looks like? You should have put it. You should have put it in your journal. What does standard form look like?
B and C are real numbers, and A and B are not both 0.
Okay, the biggest thing you need to have in your journal is this. Standard form looks like this. AX plus BY equals C. Okay, so if I were to put this with numbers in it, it might look like 3x plus 2y equals 10. Okay, this is standard form. It just means your x and y are on the left-hand side and you have a number on the right-hand side. Okay, this is always going to look like standard form. There's going to be times when they want you to put the equation into standard form, so you do need to know this for the test. The really cool thing is when you have it in standard form, actually you can do it in any form, you can solve for the x or y intercept. Do you guys remember how to do that? If I want to know the y-intercept, I plug a 0 where the x is. Okay, because that's going to say 3 times 0 is 0. Divide by 2. The y-intercept on this particular equation is 5. If I want to know the x-intercept, why would I want to know the x-intercept?
So, what do you mean?
The x-intercept tells you where it crosses the x line, right? Sometimes when you're graphing, you might get an equation that says y equals, I don't know, 3/2 x plus like 30. And this y line, it's hard to find 30, isn't it? So if I find the x-intercept, it might be here on the x line a little bit easier. That's the only reason to find the x-intercept. But you find the x-intercept the same way. You would plug in a 0 where the y equals
Find x's.
to find the x-intercept. So it's just a really fast way to find out where on the coordinate plane it crosses. So if you want to find the y, you put a 0 where the x is. If you want to find the x, you put a 0 where the y is. Any questions?
No.
This is one of the easiest rules that everybody forgets. So try and make sure you write it down or remember it because it'll save your. All right, example 3. We're going to graph these two equations, y equals 2 and x equals -1. First of all, do either one of these have a slope?
No.
Ben thinks no. What do you guys think?
I mean, -1. That's not a slope.
Nope. What is that?
I don't know.
That's an x-intercept. You have to have it in the y equals mx plus b for there to be a slope. If you look here, there's no mx on either one of these. So these are going to be just a vertical line and a horizontal line. The horizontal line is when y equals a number. So what's the y-intercept here?
2.
So I go up to 2 and I put a dot, and since there's no slope, it's just a horizontal line at positive 2.
Oh, you're not doing anything with the x.
I haven't done the x yet. Okay, x is at -1, right? So -1, I go back 1 and I put a dot, and since there's no slope, it's a vertical line, if I could draw a straight line. So whenever you see an equation that's very simple like this, without the slope, you know it's either a vertical line or a horizontal line. So you just go on the, whatever it is, if this is the y line, you go to the y line, you put a dot, and it's a horizontal line. If it's the x, you go on the x line, put a dot, and it's a vertical line. Is that confusing at all? Make sense, Charlie? Awesome. Okay, so you have put the key concept in your journal. If you haven't, make a note to go back and do that. It's the blue key concept up at the top. It's everything what we just talked about. Equations of horizontal and vertical lines. Horizontal lines, you'll always have this y equals a number, and vertical lines, you'll have x equals a number. Okay, when you see this written as a coordinate, the y will have the x as 0, and then you'll have your number, where the vertical line will have the x as a number, and the y equals 0. Remember what I told you about finding the x and y intercept? If you plug in a 0 on the other point, see how this has a 0 on the other point? You will always be able to find the y-intercept or the x-intercept. So it makes sense that this is a point that has 0. Am I going too fast? All right, so let's look at example 4. We're going to graph the equation y equals -1/2 x plus 4. Then it tells you with the domain where x is greater than or equal to 0. What is domain? Which one is that talking about? Do you guys remember what domain is? Domain is always the x. So that means x has to be 0 or greater. We can't go less than that. So when we graph that, let me grab my graph. Since it has to be greater than or equal to 0 on the x line, I can't have anything over here, because that would be considered negative, right? So we know the graph stops at the y line. It can't go less than that at all. All right, so graphing this, what's my y-intercept?
4.
So I'm going to go up to 4 and put a dot. 1, 2, 3, 4. What's my slope?
Negative 1.
So I'm going to go down 1 over 2. And then graph it. Now you see I didn't go past the y line to the left because x can't go that direction. They told us it has to be greater than or equal to 0. So then I just have a line going that direction, starting at this point. Now you could make a table if you wanted to, and sometimes they'll tell you to make a table. I don't need you to make a table if you understand how to graph using this point, or using this slope-intercept form. If the table is easier for you, then please use it. The difference on this question, other than normal, is you can't use any negative numbers for the x. So I would just plug in 0, 1, 2, 3, and then find the points that go with that. Okay, because of this rule right here. Any questions? That's essentially the lesson. I don't think I assigned you any word problems. No, I didn't. So that's all I'm going to lecture on today. You need to do numbers 3 through 8, all of them, and then 11 through 31, just the odds, and then work on IXL S7.